What's going on, everybody, and welcome to episode 72 of the Book Binge, where in this episode, we're doing just like normal every month, my monthly reading wrap up and TBR video, where we talk about everything that I just read in March and what I'm going to be reading in May, or I suppose what I plan to read in May in April. I don't know why I said May. What I plan to read in April because this month is going to be a bit of a crazy one, both in terms of what I have, sort of tentatively on the schedule, but also because of work and school and other stuff like that. Who knows how much, if any of this, I'll be able to actually get through this month. But without further ado, let's just kind of talk about what I read in March. I'm not going to lie, a lot of March as a sort of month for reading felt really, really long to me and was kind of monotonous to it a certain extent because I spent dang near the entire month finishing The Count of Monte Cristo. Now, don't get my words twisted here. I do not think that The Count of Monte Cristo was a monotonous book. I don't think that it was a bad book. Did not dislike it. Easy 5-star read. But I do want to say that the reading life was monotonous. When you spend several hours every day reading 50 pages of the same book every day and you're still barely making a dent in it, it definitely gets a little bit disheartening in a sort of way. Like reading less than 5% of a book a day, even though you're reading for 2 to 3 hours, is like, goodness gracious, it doesn't work for me. I read so slow that doing that feels monotonous, even if the book is not. So I would like to avoid doing that again in the future, but I will say that I did enjoy my time with it, despite the monotony. In the middle of the book, I did have to take a break for a couple days so that I could read something really short and quick and easy to kind of get myself out of that funk that I was feeling. And that was when I read Gregor the Overlander, the first book in the Underland Chronicles by Suzanne Collins, one of my longtime favorite series in memory. I would say the book doesn't hold up quite as well as, say, Percy Jackson and the Olympians as a series holds up, but I think that mostly comes down to the fact that I was thinking of this book and series as a YA series, and I think it is a little bit more middle grade than it was in my memory, and that's perfectly fine. I honestly have no qualms with that. Um, I still really enjoyed the book. It definitely worked as a book to read for a couple of days, like I said, to get myself out of that monotonous type of reading funk that I felt like I was in while reading Count of Monte Cristo. So that worked for me. But those were the only two books that I finished in March. I That was basically over 1,000 pages of Count of Monte Cristo that I read, and then a short book as a break. But I did manage to do all of that a few days before the end of the month because I did also start two other books. Yes, two, because I'm kind of crazy, but also wanted something different. First off, as I discussed in last Thursday's episode about April being a reading nostalgia month for me, this was a book that I absolutely had planned to read this month, 127 Hours by Aaron Ralston, originally titled Between a Rock and a Hard Place, but I just prefer this movie edition cover so much because that's what I read in memory back in like 6th grade the first time that I read it. This is a book that I remember really loving, and I'm enjoying myself with it so far yet again. Um, this was just one of the books that I planned to read in April. Was like, I'm going to read this in April. It does not matter. That's what I'm going to do. So sure, I started it a bit early at the end of March, but I'm definitely not going to be finishing it until April. So all things are okay. The other book that I did start was Gregor and the Prophecy of Bane, so the second book in the Underland Chronicles. This one's going rather quick as well. It's starting off a bit quicker paced than even Gregor the Overlander did because it doesn't have to establish very much anymore. A lot of the stuff that is being established has already been hinted at in the previous book to a certain degree. So, just started to fly right through it in about an hour. I had already read 50 pages, which is better than, say, this book where I've only been able to read about 20 pages in an hour. But yeah, these are the two books that I'm currently reading. I don't expect any of these Underland Chronicles books to take me longer than a few days, quite frankly. Even if I'm reading them at the same time as 127 hours, I don't expect this to take even just a couple weeks. Like, I think I'll be able to get through it in just a week or a week and a half at the absolute most. And for my book of the month in April, I mean, it's pretty easy choice, all things considered, just based off of the fact that I did not finish very much of anything. It's Count of Monte Cristo. It was a fantastic book. There was aspects to the end of it that I was fairly disappointed in, but I really enjoyed most everything otherwise, including the first 300 pages, which I think are some of the best I've ever read, period. Sort of alongside the quality of, say, Ashes of Man, or even maybe even more than Les Mis. But most of the rest of the book was still very good as was. But I will be outlining a lot of, at least the complaints that I had about the end that I just mentioned. I will be outlining that in a sort of spoilerish talk at the end of my otherwise spoiler-free review of the book that'll come out at some point. I'm not sure when that will be, but keep an eye out for it. But what are my reading plans after I am done with those? Well, first off, I have a couple more books that I absolutely am going to get through in April. First off being, sorry about the lighting, my camera does weird stuff sometimes, The Card Turner by Louis Satcher, which is another April nostalgia read for me, one that I'm sure, like I'm quite certain I'll plow through in just a couple days easily. This is what I plan to read after I'm done with 127 hours. And then The Lost Hero by Rick Riordan, which is the first book in the Heroes of Olympus, the sequel series to Percy Jackson and the Olympians. This series was one that I planned to give my reread at some point in 2023, but because I had not been able to start it up to this point, there's sort of a quasi-read along going along in Discord for this series, so I decided, hey, I might as well just jump on and read the books at the same time as some of the other people are going to be reading the books, because, might as well. If there's going to be any motivation that is going to make me read this series sooner than later in the year, it's going to be the read along, so I'm going to read The Lost Hero as well. I don't expect this to take me long either, and in fact, I'm very, very excited for it, knowing how much Percy Jackson held up, and just the fact that I love this series so much more than even Percy Jackson when I was younger, because it was just better, and I think it held up more for me in my reread that I did several years ago. I'm just really, really excited for it. After The Lost Hero, I do plan to read the first book on this list that isn't, targeted towards sort of younger audiences. I guess 127 Hours is an adult book technically, but the writing style and whatnot isn't like the most complex or anything. But the next book that I definitely plan to read this month, or at least start, I'm hoping that I can start this by halfway through the month and then be finished with it by the end of April, is The Way of a Dan by Philip Chase, a book that I wasn't originally planning to read this month, but as I mentioned in the book haul coming up here in a couple days, the combination of FOMO of people reading it and really enjoying it, and other people planning to read it here very soon, say in April, I decided, hey, I'm just going to go ahead and give it a shot, especially since the full trilogy will be published this year. I can go ahead and read each book, the month after it comes out, or at least plan my reading schedule around doing something along those lines. Read the whole trilogy this year, and then maybe I can talk to Philip Chase on my channel here, the end of 2023 or early 2024, and see if he's down for something like that, so that we can talk about the trilogy and maybe talk about some other stuff like Dark Tower that I enjoy. So, yeah, that's the plan for April, although not the end of this video, because I have a few other things that I would like to fit in if there's time, depending on how long, say, 127 hours takes. I'm also going to continue reading the Underland Chronicles as I finish each book, move on to the next one while I'm still reading it. So book 3 is Gregor and the Curse of the Warmbloods. I don't predict that I'll get much farther than those 2 books this month, but I will go ahead and outline Gregor and the Marks of Secret, book 4, and then the Code of Claw, book 5, for, later in the month. If there's a ton of reading time, who knows how much I'll get through and what I decide to read at any given point in time. There's no guarantees either way, but I figured I'd outline all that because why the heck not? And since I had to take a couple of months off from reading any poems by Edgar Allan Poe, I'm actually going to actively try to include 1 to 2 poems in between each book, and just, again, start to slowly make my way through, once again, Edgar Allan Poe's poetry, which was something that I was enjoying before when I was doing it, and something that I hope to continue to enjoy. So, and since few of his poems are long in any way, and mostly just take a little bit of time for me to like think about. I'm perfectly okay with fitting 1 to 2 poems in between each book because, they're really short, and I can spend, however long it takes for me to read the poem and then think about it, and then I'm done and I can move on to the next thing. So they're not huge time commitments, so I would like to fit some of those in the plan as well. But I'm looking forward to April because of it being, aside from Philip Chase, and I guess technically aside from 127 hours, it's basically just a lot of YA or middle grade stuff for palate cleansing and to change the pace of my reading, and, especially to be flying through books rather frequently, to be done with one and on to the next one really quick in a real snappy way so that I can, just kind of free myself of that funk that Count of Monte Cristo put me in, not in a bad way, but because it was so long, 1,250 pages, over 1,000 of which I read in March. I wanted something to break up the way that I'm reading this month after that. Like I said, that's what all the short and easy books are for, is to get me into a different groove so that in May I can go right into Eye of the World by Robert Jordan, first book in the Wheel of Time, without being too stressed or worried about, the process of reading long books again. But like I said, that is the end of the video. Thank you guys for watching. Stick around on Thursday for my book haul video, which has a couple really cool things in it that I'm really excited to talk about. Thank you guys for watching yet again. I'll be back again in the book haul video this Thursday.